I wasn't sure who he was, but I knew he was important. And he said, so what's your favorite wine? And I said, my favorite wine, it'd have to be a 1961 Moussigny by Joseph Drouin. What's your favorite wine? Hanson says to me, you're gonna become the first wine manager for Young's Market Company. And I said, yeah, but I really, my degree in what I'm doing is business and finance. He said, don't worry about it.
We love the San Gabriel Valley. There are some amazing people and businesses here, and we think they deserve the spotlight. Welcome to the SGV Master Key Podcast. We'll have on the people that make the SGV great. We'll find out what makes them tick, their ups and downs, their history, and we're going to have fun doing it. This is the SGV Master Key Podcast. And now your hosts, Scott Warmoth and Russell Mano.
All right, SGVers, welcome back to another episode of the SGV Master Key Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you're a regular listener, we have another exciting guest for you here today. And if you're new to the show, we capture and share the stories of the people from right here in the San Gabriel Valley. And we're excited to bring you another guest from right here. You know what's funny, Scott, is you have met people for the show at the spa, right? Like that's been your place to, I guess, have conversation, right?
A place to do business. Yeah, no, it's funny. Yeah, we've had some very good guests that I just happened to meet casually at the spa.
And what is that like for you to, is a stranger and you're just engaging them in conversation, and then how do you introduce or welcome them onto the show?
Yeah, I mean, you're having a conversation with someone and you might gauge, wow, there's something interesting or something that would be of interest to our audience, or what we're trying to accomplish, which is document the contemporary history of San Gabriel Valley. Yeah, and then I would simply ask the question, would you be interested in sharing that?
Yeah, and one thing that we never really discussed, well, sort of, you just asked me, how did we get this guest? But one thing that we never discussed was, what are our qualifications? Who are we going to exclude? And you and I have never had that conversation, but I sort of already know and trust the people that you're inviting onto the show are a certain caliber, and you've never asked me those questions, but I'm also filtering them, because we're not just going to bring anybody on the show.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I don't think we should exclude anybody because everybody is a part of the contemporary history.
Sure.
Right? But of course, certain people stand out in a certain way, and we want to get those people because they may have a more interesting story to tell immediately.
Sure. And, you have to learn through conversation what they're about, what their connection is, what they have done in the San Gabriel Valley. And if you want to know that kind of stuff or know more about the San Gabriel Valley, check out San Gabriel Valley Now, your source for city news, announcements, events, special savings, and everything SGV. Check them out on Instagram, sgv.now, and read their SGV Now magazine on their website, sgvnow.com. Like you said, everybody has a story and everybody has some sort of impact on the San Gabriel Valley. And some people, their stories are really exciting, or maybe they impact in a very special way. And that, I would say, certainly describes our guest today. His name is Robert Michero. He's the president of the board of directors of the Pasadena Symphony Association. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming.
You're very welcome.
I was excited to speak with you the first time when Scott said, I met this individual and he's interested in being on the show. And it was kind of funny because when I called you that morning, Scott was calling at the same time. And I think you connected us on the call, right?
I linked you up. Yeah, because I said, why not, let's get us together so I can kind of understand what we're doing here.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you decided to come on. Robert, what is your connection to the San Gabriel Valley?
Well, born and raised in the San Gabriel Valley. Grew up in Alhambra and then South Pasadena. Have lived in different places because of the businesses that I've been in, outside of the country and within the country. But then gravitated back to my home grounds, Pasadena, California.
Oh, wow. And that's where you reside now?
That's where I reside now and have for quite a while. yes.
And what is the job of the director of the Pasadena Symphony Association?
The president?
I'm sorry, president, yes.
Same thing. Basically, we have a board of directors. I am responsible to the board of directors of what we do in this organization. It is 95 going on 96-year-old musical organization. It is an icon within the San Gabriel Valley. We compete with many other musical organizations like the LA Phil or Hollywood Bowl or Long Beach or Pacific Symphony, etc. We are regarded as being one of the best, top-notch, mid-size orchestras in America, and certainly in California. So the board, I report to, they report to me, and then the CEO of the organization, who is an employee that runs all of our operations and, of course, very important, reports to the president of the board.
I see. Well, I'm excited. One of the things I love about this show is we get an inside look into so many different people and different businesses and organizations. So I'm really fascinated to get a look into what exactly a symphony does. I want to start maybe earlier on in what it was like for you, because this show is more about the person also. What was it growing up, in Alhambra, South Pasadena, when you were growing up here?
Well, what happened is really and truly my mom and I were adopted by a family. My mother was ballet and ended up marrying this American Italian. He got shipped off to Korea. I never saw him again. And so we came back from the East Coast, and my mother rented a room in this huge house. It was at 119 North Electric, Alhambra, off of Main Street. And it was a house owned by a family that had lost their farm in a fire during the Depression. And they came to California with all these other individuals because of the Dust Bowl and what happened historically in the country. And they settled in Alhambra. There were like 8 rooms. It was about 2 acres. Because they were farmers, there was
Electric Avenue at that time was farmland.
No, not really. No,
Okay.
no, it was homes.
But they had 2 acres.
But they had 2 acres, and on this property, they had, corn and peaches and fruit trees and rhubarb, a chicken coop in the back,
Yeah.
4 dogs, 8 cats. It was very unique. I was 3 years old when we moved in there, and as a result of that, there were 3 daughters with husbands with children, and I became I think the 3rd from the youngest of 7 kids. So I never knew I was an only child until my mother remarried when I was 9.5 years old.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so it was great because, they were Grandma Mimi, okay, is the one really, she'd pick me up and put me on the counter because the other kids were at school.
So were they the family that adopted you?
Basically.
They were the age that you could call them grandma?
Grandma, Grandpa. Grandma was Mimi and Grandpa was Daddy Dick.
Uh-huh.
And then there was the 3 daughters, and my mother actually became kind of like their 4th daughter.
Wow.
And I became one of the grandkids. And so because of their farming background, Mimi would make pies and tarts and do all the cooking, and we'd have chicken
nice
dinners
Sunday
from
dinners.
the chicken in the backyard.
Wow. Yeah.
This was of course from about 1951, 52 on. Wow. And so that's how I grew up. And so I went to Park Elementary School. I went to All Saints in Alhambra, and then back to Park. My mother remarried when I was 9, and at that time, the guy she married was a paratrooper with 82nd Airborne, a great guy. He was a carpenter. And so I ended up pounding nails and kind of learning a little bit about carpentry when we moved out of the house and moved into our own house.
In South Pasadena?
No, this is in Alhambra.
Also? Okay.
And then when I graduated in the 8th grade, I was going to go to Alhambra High School. And because I was a fairly good athlete, I was going to play football and baseball. I had played in Almancer Park in Little League, off of Commonwealth Boulevard, which is a fond memory of mine. And so all the coaches knew me. I played in Little League with Max West's Sporting Goods, Max West Bears. And Max West was a professional baseball player, very famous. It was on Main Street, this sporting goods store. So that came into play. In any event, we moved to South Pasadena. My mom wanted me to go to South Pass High School. So I went to South Pasadena Junior High for 1 year, and then went to South Pasadena High School, and we lived there.
You must have been one of the very early classes at South Pass.
You know, I don't really, I meet people older than I, and they say, hey, you know, I went to, when San Marino and South Pass were the same. And so I remember my cousin Ronnie, who was part of this family, who I gravitated towards and wanted to be like. He's 6, 7 years older. He was at South Pasadena High School. So the high school, I think, was
Had been
created
around,
in the 50s, yeah.
But your mother was a performing artist
Yes.
then.
Yes. Well, previous to that.
Yeah.
She was recruited by the New York Ballet at age 14
Wow.
and put on a train by her grandmother and grandfather. They were Mormon with the last name of Young. And so she ended up doing that in Juilliard. And then, of
Really?
course, and that as an understudy. And then I met my dad. He got shipped off to Korea. And
This was your real father.
yes, and never
Yeah.
came back.
Do you know if it was from the war or he just didn't come back?
No, from the war, from
Oh.
Korea.
Is he buried in
No. I don't know. We don't know where he is.
you don't, oh, okay.
But so anyway, basically, that was my upbringing. And then something very important is that my mom, I think I picked up natural rhythm from my mom. And also I think the athleticism. And because I was at 4 and 5 and 6 years old, like a lot of kids, I'd be in the kitchen with Grandma Mimi pounding on pots and pans. And at the age of 6, she said, enough of this. If you're going to be pounding on something, you're going to learn how to do it correctly. And so she enrolled me down at Pedrini's Music, which is a very famous musical store on Main Street in Alhambra. And Tom Jr. became my music teacher. And I'll never forget, with a snare drum, and I think I sent a picture to you guys, that was maybe at 7 years old or 8, he said to me, as I'm pounding on the drum, no, you don't do it that way. If you're going to be playing music and percussion, you're going to learn how to read music. And I hated it. All I did was want to pound on the drum. And so that's what launched me into music. And from there, gravitated pretty much for a lot of my life into music and sports.
And you were formally trained then.
Well, I had, yes. And I remember in the 7th grade being invited to join the Alhambra All-City Orchestra, which was made up of children from all over the elementary schools in Alhambra, and then some from the high school who had musical training. And there was also the Alhambra All-City Band, which I was a member of, but I'd rather be playing football on the field than being in the marching band. So I didn't really do that, but I did play with the orchestra. And I was lead percussion, in the 8th grade or whatever it was. So that's how the musical side began.
Well, you mentioned Pedrini. I took lessons at Pedrini. I haven't heard that name in a very long time. It's no longer there.
No.
Right? It was maybe like a lime green, or it had some green, or the outside was very distinct. And I remember.
What did you study?
Violin.
Oh.
Yeah. And I don't know if I told this story. Like I lost it. I lost it, and my mom was just livid.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But so, wow. Yeah, I hadn't heard that in a very long time.
So I mean the Alhambra Park,
Yeah.
okay, which we rented a condo or a place across from the Alhambra Park for a number of years before they bought a home. Of course, that was in Alhambra, on the border of South Pasadena and Alhambra, off of Alhambra Road. So all those fond memories, because when I was a kid, my cousins, they'd put me on the top of the handlebars of a bike, and we'd go down to the Alhambra Park in the summertime, play caroms and games and all of that. And so a lot of fond memories about that area, which is in the middle of the San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah. Good life, huh?
It was awesome. Like, as I tell people, I didn't realize I was an only child until I was 9.5 years old when my mother remarried, because then I ended up leaving this house where with all these kids and parents and dogs, cats, chickens, and all of a sudden, the life changed. It was a different experience for me in growing and maturing.
So you went to South Pass High School, played football?
I played football for 1 year. Then I played baseball and basketball primarily. Made varsity, my first year.
Oh, nice. Your first year?
In basketball. Yeah, we
Really?
had an awesome team. The coach, the football coach, very famous in South Pasadena, Laura, was Ray Solari.
Oh,
And
I've heard the name.
Awesome. And Coach Solari, think about it. When I went to South Pass, there were 3 grades because it was a junior high school. And there were 800 total kids in high school. So what's that mean? You had 200 and what?
60
kids per class. And of course, I don't know the percentage of girls to boys, but really and truly pretty small. Well, the teams that Coach Solari and Coach O'Neill in basketball fielded, Coach Solari was baseball and football, and Coach O'Neill was basketball. We won league championships, all CIF.
Really?
Did a lot of great things with really a small group, as opposed to going to Alhambra that was, I think, 2,500 or 3,000 students. And so that, in addition to being, I think it was in the top, one of the top 3 academically rated high schools in America at the time, along with San Marino, which was a big rival of ours.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Can you talk about when you went to Pedrini and you had to study now? Now it was, I think you said it wasn't fun.
No, not in the beginning.
So we had a piano teacher, David Cutter, talking about his students and how he tries to not lose them by doing that. Was it all not fun for you, or did you find, when did you start to enjoy it?
Well, it was fun because I just loved banging on the drums and making noise. But the academic side to it, just like learning how to read English or whatever indigenous language that you speak, was more difficult. Because I had natural rhythm, I had a propensity for percussion, and then you have to learn dynamics. The dynamics are really how hard you strike whatever it is to make the sound that you're going to make. And you look at a score and you can see what that dynamic is. So you have to learn that. Then you also have to learn tempo, of course, from a monochrome, which gives you 4/4 time, 3/4 time, half time, whatever. And then, of course, you have to learn the notes, because in percussion, with a number of percussion instruments, marimba is an example, or timpani, you tune those heads of the timpani drums to a particular pitch or key. So therefore, you have to learn that. But as opposed to strings, which to me, that's a whole different dynamic, you're looking at tempo, dynamics, and you're looking at pitch of the note. But when you're in violin, as you know, are you bowing up or are you bowing down? And upon what beat, and upon, within that score. It's more complicated to me than percussion. So anyway, he would let me just go crazy, and do my thing on a snare drum, and then a bass drum, and then into different musical instruments. But then he'd say, okay, now we need to read this music, because he understood I was fighting learning how to read. And so he had to figure out a tool to do that.
So you really had a well-rounded, growth period, a Renaissance man, kind of, right?
Once again, I'm not a social psychologist or a psychiatrist or any of that, but I can tell you, A, there was security. B, I was raised with people that, even though they weren't my family, became my family. And that instilled some discipline, because they were older, other older cousins. So if you got out of line, you were put back in line, and you were part of something bigger than yourself. And that's what I think is really, really important in many aspects of life. Little did I know that this was something as a life lesson, and the things that you learn, how to communicate or how not to communicate. I remember, Grandma Mimi grabbing me, putting me in the bathroom and putting a bar of soap in my mouth.
Really?
Okay, in those days.
So you hear about that, but you actually got
I
that.
lived it. Or how about this? I mean, I can only remember, and of course, I make it probably more traumatic than it was, but they were farmers, so they also had a lot of flowers, a lot of roses. So I can remember getting into trouble, doing something I shouldn't have, and she'd grab me, take me in the backyard with a pair of scissors, cut a rose, a piece of the rose, about 3 feet long, take all the little thorns off, and hit my backside a couple times. Not hard, but that was part of the discipline in those days, and I guess that generation. Today, we're afraid of traumatizing our children, and so you don't do that. But in those days, that's what happened.
Yeah.
And so and I believe, quite frankly, I learned from that. I learned right and wrong, even though I would do things that I knew was probably wrong, but I did it anyway, like kids do. And I would get in trouble. But they were very loving and caring. So my environment was one of great security. We would do, in the summertime, puppet shows. And we'd take for the neighborhood, because we had all these kids.
Yeah.
So my older cousins and then the two younger ones, they had puppets, and they made puppets, and we used the picnic table in the back, and Mimi created a curtain, and there we were doing puppet shows, and we charged like a nickel, for the puppet shows, and we'd sell cookies that we made.
Yeah.
And that's kind of you're learning a little entrepreneurship.
And today you
to
have
perform, and
Pasadena Pops on the Green, right?
well, that's at the Arboretum.
At the Arboretum.
At the LA County Arboretum, yeah. But so, when you really look at the journey and where you are, because I think most of the time, for me, you don't know really where you're going. You know where you want to go in certain things. I want to play basketball, or I want to play baseball, or I want to learn how to surf, I want to learn how to ski. But these things that happen in your youth do shape the ability or the drive to complete what you want to do. And I think that's a really important thing. So in my life, I was so lucky to have that happen.
So you were involved in sports. You had this introduction to music. And where did your path go after high school?
Well, okay. What happened there is that I wasn't the best of student in high school. And our starting five all had scholarships, one way or the other, to college. So I had to take a 1A English class at PCC, and I had to get a B or above, really, to continue into college where I wanted to go. So I did. And my instructor was Dr. Joseph Hall, who's very famous for other reasons. But Joe found out that I was, when I was a kid, I got into backpacking and that avenue through one of my uncles, real uncle, who was a member of the Sierra Club. And I would be climbing up on the roof, playing paratrooper because of my stepdad. And he was related to my stepdad's family. And he said to my mom one time, we need to get Bob, we need to get him outdoors and do some other things. So around 14, I made a trip to Yosemite. And at 15, was enrolled in it was a youth mountain climbing group. And that got me into the mountains and doing what I did. I then became what's called a Little Mary.
I haven't
a
heard
little
of
Mary.
that.
A little Mary is a pioneer term. When the pioneers in wagon trains and cattle drives for cowboys were coming west, getting cattle from Texas up to Wyoming or wherever they're going, you had a cook. And the cook always had some younger kid, who wasn't strong or whatever like the cowboys were. Or on a wagon train, you had assistants helping with cooks, and they were called a Little Mary. Also, a bull cook. That was the other name for it. And so I became, quote, the Little Mary for pack stations out of Red's Meadow when I was very young. And that got me into the mountains, got me into backpacking, nature, all of that, which to this day is very important to me. And so that was another avenue of enlightenment for me and excitement. And for years, all of our best friends, my first wife, we would backpack into the Sierras every summer, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then go skiing up at Mammoth, in our 20s and into our 30s. And to this day, I still ski at 75.
Quite a variety of things that made up your life.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And I really believe having that experience with 7 other kids who all had different interests. Like my cousin Steve took up the guitar. Well, I took up the guitar eventually. I do play the guitar, but I'm really not active in that at all. And so the music side, the sports side, which I don't think is unusual for kids. But when you have a family with 7 kids, you're going to have diversity. And so performing, doing these shows, puppet shows and little drama shows and little skits for the neighborhood. I mean, I think about it now, and here I am with one of the greatest musical organizations in Southern California, and kind of doing it, but doing it a way different way.
How did your college career pan?
Well, it worked out very well. I had a number. I went back and forth to different colleges. So I did the summer at PCC. I went to University of Arizona. I transferred from University of Arizona back to Cal State LA because my stepdad was very ill. He almost cut his wrist off, and I came home from that. I actually graduated. I got a degree from Cal State LA, and then went to UCLA, and then eventually did different executive programs at Anderson at UCLA in economics and finance is where I gravitated to. But during that time, you want to make money, and because of me working at Thomas Wines and Spirits from the age of about 15, really through high school, that got me into wine and spirits from dealing with customers and dealing with the owner, Thomas Ebert. And that led to a friendship and a business association between Tom Ebert and a guy by the name of Gary Foster. And Gary Foster is a very famous jazz musician and had a band that played at the Baked Potato. So Gary Foster played, well, he played all over and had a band. And so I met Gary, and because I was into percussion, I ended up doing little stints with jazz groups in college at parties and different places, played a little rock and roll and made a little money, and so that came back because, quite frankly, during my high school years, I was out of the music. I was, a student, and I was doing sports. But then the music came back in college because I met some people that were musicians, and so I ended up doing some jam sessions with them. That would lead to performing a few places. But Gary's very famous. I think he's still alive today. I haven't seen him in many, many years.
You said you were working at a wine and spirits store at age 15?
Yeah, it was down the street. Our house.
I remember seeing it. Is that still there? Yeah.
It's still there, but it's had different owners.
Yeah.
But I lived down the street from Thomas Wines and Spirits.
Okay.
It was a 2005 Huntington Drive. So where Atlantic and Garfield cross at Huntington,
Yes.
if you went west towards South Pass,
Yes.
it would be on the south side of the street. And Pine came up and intersected with Huntington. And so I got to meet the owner, and basically would go in and carry boxes, and they had a wine cellar, and I would go to work there.
Oh, is it on this like really unusual corner where
Yes.
you can't tell if you need to go straight or right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
that's
I know where it
Thomas.
is. Yes.
and so that Tom and his wife Janice, they were very progressive. They came from West LA. Thomas had different businesses, and then they moved to South Pass and they opened up this liquor store. But at this time, the wine business and the spirit business were very different than it is today. You had Jurgensen's in Pasadena, Hal Jurgensen. You had Cloakey's. And then the West LA, you had Briggs, Pearson's, which were high-end stores for fine wine. But in those days, the California wine business, and I'm talking now, of course, the 60s and going into the 70s, was a different thing. Almaden, Gallo, the jug wine business, San Antonio Winery, very famous here in Los Angeles. The majority of the wine sold was Burgundy, Chablis, da-da-da-da-da. And then the development of varietal wines came about. So the Robert Mondavis of the world were created. The Charles Krug that was in the jug business moved into varietal business. And all of a sudden the proliferation of smaller wineries occurred in Northern California and a few in Southern California. So here I am, listening and learning about these wines. The majority of wine, high-end wine that was sold was French wine. And the reason for that is you had all of these guys and gals, but predominantly men, that came out of the war that were in France. Mm. So what did they know? They knew Puy Fuissé. They knew Chianti. They knew these French wines. And that led, of course, to the proliferation of Bordeaux in America and Burgundy in America and Italian wines in America. California, even though it had been around from the 1800s, you really didn't have the same thing. Well, as that generation, their consumption habit started dying out, as a generation is dying out, the proliferation of California began, and all of a sudden more and more wineries in California began. So little did I know that I was getting this education in enology and wines, because Tom and Janice, I remember I'd be invited over to their house on a Sunday, and my mom was a little leery of that. And they would always have two wines. Janice was a great cook. She could make Grand Marnier soufflés or coq au vin or whatever. And they would always have two wines, two Cabernets or two Bordeauxs or two white Burgundies or two whatever. And they would let me taste it. They would let me drink it. And I didn't like it, by the way. I didn't like that too much because I wanted something sweet. I didn't want something dry. And little did I know that education would move into college, because I worked at Vaughn's as an example. And I worked at stores. I worked at Briggs while over at UCLA. And then when I came back, I'd work at Thomas. And of course, then I was selling, spirits and wine over the counter. And so that added to what became my professional career, which is the wine and spirits business for almost 50 years now.
Wow.
And I remember talking to you before. You spent a lot of time in France.
What happened was I was recruited in the finance department at Young's Market when I got out of UCLA in 1973. And a gentleman by the name of Webb Hansen, who's very famous in the lore of the wine and spirits business for many generations, was Young's Market. And he saw me sitting at a desk in the accounting department. And he recognized me because he had come into Thomas Wines and Spirits years before with a guy by the name of Petrus Desbois, who owned Chateau Saint-Georges in Montant, Saint-Emilion. And Tom was home. Janice was there. It was the summertime. And so he came in. And I had taken French, but I wasn't very good at it. And he remembered me.
Wow.
And he said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I was recruited by Young's, and my aunt and everybody said, you're crazy. You need to go to work for these guys. So I was thinking at the time, I'm going to be the next CFO or something, or control. That's what I was going to do. And what I was doing was just entering checks and doing basic accounting. So he said, come to my office. And I wasn't sure who he was, but I knew he was important. And I walked over to his office and sat down. And he said, so what's your favorite wine? And I said, well, my favorite wine, it'd have to be a 1961 Moussigny by Joseph Drouin. What's your favorite wine? He goes, well, I think, I can't quite remember all of them, but I think it was a 1929 Lafite. And for the next half an hour, we just had a conversation about wine. And when I was in that liquor store and I'd see salesmen come in from Young's or from NDC was the name of another company, these liquor companies, I said, man, I don't want to be one of those guys. I didn't like their approach. I didn't think they were very sharp. And so I never wanted to do that. So Webb Hansen says to me, you're gonna become the first wine manager for Young's Market Company. And I go, well, Mr. Hansen, Mr. Miller over there, he says, don't worry about Miller. And I said, yeah, but I really, my degree in what I'm doing is business and finance. He said, don't worry about it. And then basically he said, if you don't take the job and move over to the wine department, you won't be at Young's Market. Okay. And that was the implication. So I go back, and about 2 days later, Mr. Hansen comes and gets me and walks me into Vern Underwood Sr.'s office, which was very intimidating. And Mr. Underwood says, I hear Hansen wants you to join this doggone wine division. And remember, in those days, wine was like 5% of the total business in the wine and spirits business. And so this was 1974 to be exact. And so I said, oh, well, I guess I can do this. And then Mr. Hansen explained to me what I was going to make. And rather than $9 an hour, it was like $1,800, $2,000 a month, a car allowance,
wow,
a T&E. And I remember looking at it, I said, T&E, and I was thinking of something different. And he goes, travel and entertainment expense. And I'm going, wow. And that's how it started.
Wow, you were a big shot, huh?
Well, no, I wasn't a big shot. I was a guy. What I did is we had two companies, Young's Market, William George, and the spirit brands were divided between the two companies. Young's Market being the number one liquor and wine distributor at that time, like in the western part of the United States, and very famous, as Vern Underwood was for what he did in the spirit business and trademarking brands and building them like Smirnoff or Jose Cuervo, okay? And so I ended up being one of three people, and I would go into stores all over Southern California. It could be Clokey's, it could be seeing Hal Jurgensen, and I was the guy to talk wine, fine wine, because the liquor guys, they were union, and they were selling spirits, and they didn't know a lot about wine. So I was like the wine expert to go in there. And I was not union. I was, quote, management. And bottom line on that is, by 1978, after being taken out to Anaheim and running that branch for Young's Market, I was called back into Southern California to become general sales manager. And then I replaced Webb Hansen in 1980 as Vice President General Manager. I was like 29 or 30 years old. And that's how my career just took off because the industry took off. And I was kind of on the ground floor of this for the expansion of wine here in California, in the United States.
Wow. I never would have guessed that this conversation would have gone that way, given what you do now. That's interesting. And I'm wanting to know how that ties into what you do now. Robert, we ask each guest to bring an item of significance with them. What did you bring with you today?
Well, for years, as you asked earlier, I lived in France. I've lived in Italy, off and on in New York. And so when I was invited to go to France by Taittinger Champagne and Louis Jadot, which were brands of Young's Market. And Mr. Hansen said, we need to send this kid over there so he can learn. Well, up to that point, I thought the sun rose and set on California wine because that's what I primarily knew. I knew Bordeaux's, I knew the name, and I knew Burgundies. But California was the thing, right? It was always expanding. So when I'm over there, I first thing I do is go to Bordeaux, to Chateau Saint-Georges, and an event in Bordeaux, and I visit a few of the chateaus. And then I go to Burgundy, and I'm with Louis Jadot and Bouchard Péri-Fils. And of course, they're taking you to the vineyards. Now, this is what we call old world, especially at that time. In viticulture being the farming science of grape growing, and then enology, which is the production of those grapes from the farming viticulture. And so as I'm there, every single producer, whether it's Champagne or in Burgundy or Bordeaux, the one thing they talk about is the soil and the geology. And that is the basis, besides the type of plant, the type of clone of a vine, that influences the fruit that comes from that vine. So geology was always an interest to me. Remember, I'm going to the Sierras. I understand that the Sierras are made through glacial episodes, not volcanic, even though the Owens Valley is. So I have an interest in this. And so over the years, even though the French wouldn't like it, or Paso Robles probably doesn't care, or Napa, I would pick up stones or rocks and soil from the areas that I was in. And so as an example, this is Balzac limestone. This is from the Montrachet vineyard in the Côte de Beaune. The Montrachet vineyard produces a wine that is considered to be, if not the greatest, in the top 3-4 white wines of the world. It's very expensive, $2,000-$3,000 a bottle. Well, the reason that wine is what it is, besides the enological practice of whoever is making it, is because of this. And as you travel through Burgundy and you go to the north, all of a sudden you find something like this, which looks very different than the limestone. Well, guess what? The great Pinot Noirs come from the Côte de Nuit. The great white wines come from the Côte de Beaune. Well, guess what? It's different. And as a result of that, the differentiation in the soil type, or the metamorphology, which is what it's called today, which is a form of geology, has everything to do with the nature of the plant and what the plant produces. So as an example, this is limestone, and this happens to come from the Creston Vineyard, which is in the highlands of Paso Robles. Well, guess what? Very, very similar. It was a seabed that covered this. Wow. And that's what they have in common. So anyway, what I brought today was these rocks that I've been collecting for 50 years. And when I've done a wine dinner and we're doing Burgundy, or we're doing Bordeaux, or we're doing Paso Robles, or we're doing Napa, to the patrons of the wine dinner at the Parkway Grill, or at Smitty's, or at Celestino's, I always bring my rocks.
Wow.
Because this is the basis of the farming and the viticulture, and has a major influence upon what is produced from those vineyards. And that's what makes it consistent, and that's what makes it who it is.
I wouldn't have known that. It's the first I've heard of that. And so you're saying that parts of California have a very similar geology to France or Italy?
Parts,
yeah.
yes.
And
yes.
so similar types of wines can come.
Now this is where
it gets more complicated.
In the 70s and the 80s, when winery explosion occurred in California, we went from 125 wineries in the 60s to 800, and boutique wines occurred. People that were making 1,000, 2,000 cases. We're not talking about the big operations making 100,000 cases, and so the science of viticulture has changed as the education has changed and the discovery of the relationship of the metamorphology, the geology, the soil, the type of soil, along with water, which is a very touchy subject here in California, as you know. And then in addition to that, on the other side of viticulture is the different clones of Chardonnay, or the different clones of Pinot, or the different clones of Cabernet. It's a dialectic process. What works best in that specific area. Microclimate, everybody hears about a micro. Well, we have a unique microclimate, which is soil and climate relative to what is planted there. And therefore, what's happened is we're learning in the cooler climates, those varietals of wine, like a Chardonnay or a Pinot, do better than in a hotter climate, where the varietals of a Cabernet do better, because that plant does better within that climate, along with the indices of the soil and the metamorphology of the area, which is changing over time.
Wow, fascinating. I think that is analogous to so much in life, right? Like for things to flourish, to have a good foundation or be planted in good soil. Robert, I want to get into the things that you are doing now, especially with the Pasadena Symphony, but let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
At Wormuth Law, they believe that just because you speak a foreign language, come from a different culture, or simply don't know how to navigate the legal system, that should not prevent you from compensation from injury or receiving benefits. Their multicultural staff have been helping SGVers like you for over 38 years. Visit law888.com or call them at 626-784-7017 and tell them you heard about them on this podcast.
All right, we're back with Robert Michero. Robert, before the break, you were sharing with us what you brought with us today, and clearly you have a passion and knowledge for wine, and much more than just the product, but what goes into it. I want to move the conversation now into what you're doing now with the Pasadena Symphony. So where does that connect?
Well, where the connection to me comes from, as you've heard, music to me is a variable potential in our life. It's an art form. And I've always said, whatever you put on your body or in your body is very different than just about every other product that we purchase or is part of our life. And that's because it has to do with our senses, what we perceive, how it makes us feel. Wine is something that we taste. It's a food, like all foods. And we all have our unique things about what we like, what we don't like, why we whatever, but we identify that way. Music is sensual because of visually, if we see it played, but we hear it played. And when that happens, it becomes part of us. It's integral to our life. Whether you're into classical music or jazz or pops or hip hop or EDM, it doesn't make any difference. But certainly, music is a very important aspect to our life. So to me, because of my background and what I did, it's been a little bit more important maybe to me than to others that don't play music or don't read music. So I did. And then as I went through my career, I always had music there. As an example, when I was managing director at San Antonio Winery, we sponsored. We were one of the sponsors for the Pasadena Symphony and the Pasadena Pops through our wine donations and everything we do there. And so the tie-in from business and running businesses eventually led to me being asked to join the board of the Pasadena Symphony, which I had gone through for many years, knew about. My parents used to take me to Ambassador when I was a kid. And so I did. I joined this group, and that was approximately 15 years ago, even though 10 years before we were supporting the symphony as a sponsor and going to concerts and listening to music. So that was the tie-in for me. And then as I was on different committees of the Pasadena Symphony, then that put me deeper into what the symphony is about and what the mission statement is, what the vision is, and how it has gone along and survived in the San Gabriel Valley. This will be our 96th year. Think about how many businesses or organizations, especially nonprofits, have been through that.
Yeah.
I know there have been a lot of prominent names associated with it through the years.
Very prominent.
Yeah.
There's a lot if we go back and look at the history of this. But the way that the symphony works, by the way, it's called the Pasadena Symphony Association. And under the umbrella of that is the Pasadena Symphony, which is devoted to classical music. That classical music is performed by, we have 100 musicians. They are all part of the union. They're all cream of the crop. These musicians share their professional time with LA Phil and other orchestras because that's the norm in the industry. So many of our musicians are the ones that do Hollywood and do the movies, which is, by the way, that's very, very high level of musical prominence. So the classical side, we do 6 performances at Ambassador Auditorium, very famous auditorium. It was created by Herbert Armstrong, the Worldwide Church of God here in Pasadena many, many years ago. And this auditorium is considered to be, quote, the Carnegie Hall of the West. And acoustically, it's up there with some of the greatest top 10 auditoriums in the world, acoustically. So we do 6 performances a year. We begin in November, we go through May. We do a matinee and an evening performance at the moment on Saturdays. The other part is our Pasadena Pops. Around 11 years ago, 12 years ago, the Pasadena Pops was a separate organization. It was based out of La Cañada. And when the economic downturn occurred in this country about 12 years ago, the Enrons, the stock market, and everything else, nonprofits, I don't care what nonprofit you were in, had financial difficulties. And it was decided at the time by the board of directors between both groups to merge. So the Pasadena Symphony Association, which was devoted primarily to the classics and built on that, now had the Pasadena Pops. Famous individuals, Marvin Hamlish came to Pasadena and became our conductor and director for the Pasadena Pops. We lost our conductor for the classics, went on a conductor search, hired another conductor for that, because they're different, they're different forms of music. The discipline is, of course, music, but performed by the very same artists, musicians for both groups. We do 6 performances at the Los Angeles County Arboretum for 4,000 to 5,000 people. Michael Feinstein is our conductor and director, and Marvin Hamlish grew very ill and passed away very sadly. He's the one that opened the door to Michael Feinstein, who is considered, quite frankly, to be currently he's the father of the Pops, etc. And worked with the Gershwins, and very, very famous, and resides, by the way, now in Pasadena.
He worked with the Gershwins.
Well, with one in particular.
Oh, yeah?
And there's a book that has been written about this. And so the stories, when Michael is doing the performance, whether it's Broadway or whatever it may be, he is a storyteller, and he will explain how these pieces, many of them that he has found and brought back, and we performed these originals at the Arboretum.
Yeah, I've been to the show at the Arboretum, and it really is quite a spectacle. It's a great show. And do you still have picnics beforehand and this type of thing?
We have, yeah. So what we do is we have our conductor's circle. Conductor's circle are the first number of rows, people buying these premium tables. And the majority of people bring their own food, like you do at the Hollywood Bowl, and they bring their wine or spirits or whatever they do. But we also have restaurant service where you can order meals in advance, and then that's brought to your table, etc. And so we have the tables, but then we also have towards the back of the Arboretum, we'll get 2,000 people, 2,500 people that bring their own tables and bring their own picnic baskets and have a great time watching and listening to the performances.
Do you remember Dr. Newman?
Yes.
Yeah, he would go to these concerts.
Yeah.
Everyone, and he was telling me about bringing his wine, and his wife and would sit on the lawn. But yeah,
it's a great experience because you're outdoors on a summer night, and in the Arboretum, and just have this nice event.
I was wondering where you fit 4,000 people in the Arboretum. They must be on the lawn, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's a natural. It's so from looking at the mountains, okay, going to the north and to the south, you have a natural slope.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like a natural amphitheater, of course, much larger than that, and acoustically, it's fantastic. We bring everything in, by the way, to do these performances. We build a stage. We have a huge backdrop, which is a tent. We have to bring in all our power. We supply all of the sanitation, the toilets, water, EMTs, everything for what we do. It's quite an operation. So 6 performances throughout the summer. The third element of the Pasadena Symphony Association, which to me is very dear to me, is our PYSO, the Pasadena Youth Symphony Orchestra. And that has grown tremendously since I've been there, and not because of me, but because of our board and because of our CEO, who has made it a very, very important aspect of what we do. It now consists of over 800 kids, okay? 800 kids, basically from the 6th grade through high school. And we are also tied into PUSD, Pasadena Unified School District. Years ago, there was a need for kids that are beyond the 6th grade and up, that have a basic proficiency in music. And so we are the Pasadena Youth Orchestra also, which is open to all of these children with different ensembles. There are 2 basic ensembles for strings. And when the pandemic hit, what happened was the PUSD had to discontinue basically their arts program. And we took it over as the teaching institution for PUSD, servicing over 9,700 kids. It's grown now, of course, and the arts program, of course, is back. But we are one of the major teaching elements for PUSD and through our PYSO.
How do you do that? Do you send members of the orchestra into individual schools?
That, and we have teachers. We have a whole lineup of individuals at the different levels, strings and brass, etc., divided into these different groups relative to where they are in their development. And what it's happened, the Pasadena Youth Symphony Organization, I mean, 14 years ago, you're talking 100 kids. We're 800 now.
Yeah, and that's quite awesome that they have an organization, a symphony at the level that you are.
Yes,
working with them directly.
And I might add, there's other organizations also.
Yeah,
there's a Pasadena Conservatory that's also part of this, which is a much smaller, or it's a conservatory. We're a symphony, so it's a different thing. And yes, and to me, it's one of my major initiatives in becoming president to really ramp this up, because to me, this is so important. Yes, we teach music, but we're teaching in the element of the education of music, life lessons that I learned, that I use. For instance, when you become a part of an organization or a youth ensemble, whatever it may be, you're not by yourself. You're not sitting there with Padrini by yourself trying to learn music. And as a result of that, you're challenged trying to reproduce this piece of music. And you're going to fail sometimes, or you're not going to do it right. But because you have peers, you have other people saying we can do this. So it's like a team sport. You've got a team here. So that builds confidence, self-awareness. It creates discipline. It creates focus.
The very things that you mentioned from your childhood.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're recreating them for this whole generation.
I think it's about our society. I think it's about cultural development.
Right.
It's about realizing you're not by yourself, and there's something bigger than yourself. And when you become something positive like that, your self-awareness is going to be there.
Right.
Your self-confidence is going to be there. You can overcome failure. The question is, you keep working at it to overcome that. And that's what PYSO is all about. That's our educational program. So those are the three elements of what the Pasadena Symphony Association is.
Wow, that's wonderful. Just to hear that the district was going to go from losing this program, and I don't know what their teachers are like, but now they're getting these world-class, leaders in music to teach them. I've often found that no matter what industry that people are doing, the really great people in their industry tie it to something bigger, that actually what they're doing is just a medium for, really affecting and leaving something lasting for the world. And I definitely hear that in what you're communicating.
One element that's so important to the Pasadena Symphony Association is our diversity and our equity and our inclusion. It's a major part of our initiative of who we are and what we do. Look at the San Gabriel Valley. Look at our cultural diversification. Look at how we meld together in what we do in our lifestyle and how important that is to us. And so we are an arts organization, and yes, the basis of what we do is music. But the fact of the matter is, it's outreach to everybody. And that outreach brings us together. And the one common denominator is beautiful music. Live performance. There's nothing like it. Yes, you can go on YouTube and you can go on the internet and you can listen to whatever you're doing, or you go on your TV. But when you're sitting there watching musicians live, playing what they do, and you come to our youth orchestra and you see our Philharmonic, which is the top level. And by that time, you've got these kids that have come up for 6 years, 5 years. We took them to Carnegie Hall this last summer. We took them to China before the pandemic to play. And when you see these kids play, and they're playing Bach or Beethoven or Brahms or whatever it is, and how syncopated they are, it's awesome. And then more importantly, when you go back to the very beginning, our first level of strings, here are these kids with violins, their feet aren't on the ground. They can't touch the ground, and they've got their violins, and they're playing. Now, maybe they're not in perfect pitch or perfect tune or syncopation, but that's how they begin. And as soon as that happens, guess what we've done? Laura Unger, who's CEO of the organization, realized this a number of years ago, how we need to really interface with community engagement, which we always did, but in a broader range through our diversity and our inclusion. And to do that is when we work with the Pasadena Unified School District and created ensembles for these kids that are like in the 4th grade that didn't have access to music at that level. And what's happened is all of a sudden those 100 kids have grown to 800.
Wow.
As a major thing. And that is really the story about our PYSO, about our youth orchestra, and who we are as an organization. Our board is made up of 33 people. We're going to go to 40. They are attorneys and business people and realtors, and they're diversified in what they do. But the mission is really to be behind an organization to create music at the highest level that's possible.
Yeah.
And that's what we are and what we do.
It's definitely a beautiful mission to have. The San Gabriel Valley is definitely very diverse, and that's part of what we also believe makes it very unique and beautiful. And you, Robert, are made up of so much more than just your wine experience and the Pasadena Symphony, and we're going to get into a little bit more of what makes you you.
So we'd like to talk now about some of your favorite or most influential places or activities you've experienced in your life in the San Gabriel Valley. So what are 3 places that mean something to you?
Okay, well, I think because, as I explained about the going to the mountains and backpacking, etc., the Arroyo Seco with JPL, at the headwaters, and as it filters south into the Seco, and then the Rose Bowl, Jackie Robertson Park, and then the Aquatic Center. Think about that geographical area and how important it is to the San Gabriel Valley. It's an icon. We know the Rose Bowl. But when you look at the physicality of it and the beauty of it, and and then go out in the summertime, you've got 700 kids playing soccer, okay? You have a golf course with 2 courses in Brookside.
You've got all those runners running the Rose Bowl.
And then around that, you have community engagement. And I mean, the things that the Rose Bowl is doing, diversifying and the musical programs and everything they're doing, to me, because I live in Pasadena, and I'll get into another place soon, is very, very important to the San Gabriel Valley. Remember, if you go back to the 1800s, Devil's Gate Dam was a major supplier of water, to the San Gabriel Valley. And there's a good reason why, okay? So that's one of them.
Yeah, that is definitely a high point of San Gabriel living, San Gabriel Valley living.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, what's the second?
The Arboretum, Los Angeles County Arboretum. I think you have a home or you have an apartment or whatever, I guarantee you 99.9% of them have plants and something living and something that evolves as the seasons evolve. And then when you think about the diversity, go to the Arboretum any day of the week, but especially a Sunday, and go in and look at the diversity of the humanity that's there, walking around, just looking at everything, being outdoors, going to the lake, looking at the facilities, learning about plants and the horticulture. That is the basis of it.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very important to the San Gabriel.
That's another type of diversity that we don't talk about. But the plant life. How about a third place?
Okay, well, I'm prejudiced. Okay, I lived on Orange Grove for years, and my wife and I, when we had our child, put her in the stroller, and we would walk down to the Ambassador area.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, I've known about it for many, many years. I played there, 45 years ago, a little stint with the orchestra. When you look at what the Ambassador Auditorium is and how beautiful it is, to me, historically, for what it's for, which is the entertainment of the community. It, to me, is one of the most important places that you go to. And then the other thing is, if you walk around...
That was it last night.
That was it last night. You
So
saw it.
beautiful. I took a picture of it. Yeah, there was an event last night, and the blue lights and the water. And
So when you think about Pasadena, what are icons? And what's an icon?
Wrigley Mansion, Rose Bowl.
Yes, Rose Bowl. I would say Huntington Hospital.
Sure.
Our City Hall, which is
Yeah.
magnificent, that's where we do our gala in September at City Hall. Norton Simon
Yeah.
Museum.
PCC.
The culture
Yeah.
of what we are and what identifies us. And those places personally identify to me, and I identify to them, and that's why I bring them up.
yeah.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
What's really great is, for the most part, it's free.
Yeah.
Okay?
It is.
This is free. It is. You can go there, you walk around, you see it.
Well, the Arboretum is free, I think, on the second Tuesday of every
Yes.
month.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for sharing those three SGV3 with us and our audience, and for sharing your journey, the items you've brought with us. If someone wants to go watch a performance, what's the best way to get information about that?
Best way to go is to go to our website, www.pasadenasymphony-pops.org.
Awesome.
O-R-G. So just put in Pasadena Symphony, and it'll take you right there. And then you'll have a lot of information. You'll have all the information, all the concerts, when they are, who's performing, what the performance is. Details on seats, parking, etc. And then you can get into our history, who we are, our PYSO. Lots of ways to become part of, either as a patron or a donor or a sponsor or whatever. Because when you think about it, we are the San Gabriel Valley's musical entity. We are. Our history makes us that. Think about, we've been through depressions, we've been through wars, recessions, economic downturns, the changes in habits in our music, and we're still here. And there's a reason why. And we will be here a long time from now.
Sure. Yeah, I hope so. I'm definitely going to come to one of these performances, I believe, in the summertime, and maybe possibly one at the Arboretum. So
Great.
I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for that invitation, and thank you for coming on our show today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there you go. There's another episode for you in the books. I hope you enjoyed that time in learning about the Pasadena Symphony and what Robert Michero has done in his life and his influence on the youth of Pasadena, the youth of San Gabriel, and just the community here as a whole. Don't forget to check them out on their website, and you can check out our full back catalog of episodes on our website, www.sgvmasterkey.com. Don't forget to like and share, and if you enjoy this type of content, please consider subscribing, and until next week, we'll see you then.
You've been listening to the SGV Master Key Podcast. Our passion is the small businesses and the people that make up the San Gabriel Valley, and it's our honor to have them on the show. We hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure to like, rate, and review. The show is produced by Russell Mano, edited by Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on the SGV Master Key Podcast.
Mother, no, kind of mother.